have with us today a two-time Free Flow alumnus who is here at the University Club of Winter Park for the first time. Noah Lugeons is a podcaster, author, outspoken atheist activist. He hosts the Scathing Atheist, winner of the 2014 Podcast Award for Best Religious Podcast, as well as God Awful Movies, which has been performed live at major atheist conferences across the US, the UK, Australia, and right here in Orlando last year. He's also the author of several books on atheism, including his latest, Outbreak, A Crisis of Faith, How Religion Ruined Our Global Pandemic, which explores religion's role in America's riddled response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Noah is here for the weekend with his wife, Lucinda, who does a segment on the show, This Week in Misogyny, that talks about misogyny and patriarchy. Yes. And today, Noah will use a tarot demonstration to reveal cold reading techniques showing how we underestimate our own gullibility, overestimate others, and how he even once fell for the illusion. Noah, welcome to the CFFC.
Now, I brought my tarot cards with me today. I'm going to bust those out in a second. We're going to do a tarot reading. Well, it'll be a few minutes, but we're going to do a tarot reading. And I'm going to do, as I do this, I'm going to try to help you understand if you haven't done, I'm sorry? Is it a little too loud? Okay, I have no control over that, but hopefully they heard me. So what I'm going to do today, like I said, I'm going to do a tarot reading. I'm going to try to help everybody here see how people get fooled by these things and how people fool themselves with these things as well. But it's a really hard talk. I might seem a little more nervous than I normally do. That's not because I'm nervous about being in front of a group of people. It's because I'm nervous about revisiting this part of my life. Okay, so for about 15 years, I read tarot all over the country at different pagan communes and things like that. I spent a lot of time doing it, and it's okay. So there's a few folks in here that are fellow olds. You ever look at a picture of yourself from like 20, 30 years ago, and you look at it and you go, "How the hell did I ever think those jeans looked good?" Right? Like, who told me I could pull off that mustache? Doing this talk is like that, but with my whole being. Right? How could I have ever believed that? How could I have ever done that? And so it's actually been a kind of a difficult thing for me to do. So before we actually get to the reading itself, I kind of want to tell you how I got there. I'm going to make some excuses here. It all started when I was about 15 years old. I was at my buddy Gene's house, and there was a bunch of people. It wasn't quite a party, but there were a bunch of people there. And among them was a girl that I had a crush on. I was very shy, wasn't good at talking to girls. And at one point, she pulls up Gene's tarot deck. And she says, "Does anybody know how to read tarot?" And I had a terrible idea. Yeah, don't worry, the captions didn't catch it either. I realized, hey, I could just lie and say I know how to read tarot and have this girl's undivided attention for like 30, 40 minutes. That seemed like a great idea. So she brought it. I said, "Yeah, pick me, I do." So she brings the tarot over. Luckily, Gene had this little mat that went with them that tells you like where to put each card and what it means or whatever. So I just started making shit up. And I'm pretty good at making shit up, right? I think I'm a better bullshitter than average. I don't remember anything I said. I remember one thing, actually. There's only one thing I actually remember because I just did platitudes the whole time. I had seen on like 60 Minutes or some news magazine show at some point, somebody giving a tarot reading or a tea leaf reading or whatever. And he turned to the person he was reading for and he says, at one point he says, "Well, you know, like it's kind of like how a dog has 4 legs, but it can't go in 4 directions." But it sounds wise, right? It sounded wise to me. So I remember I worked that in at one point. I said that and everybody nodded along. So I'm going through this reading. I'm just making shit up as I go. And the whole time I'm sure I'm just embarrassing myself. And when it's all over, everybody's going to make fun of me about this for years afterwards. Everybody starts gathering around to watch me do it because this is before the internet. We were really boring back in the 90s. And I get all the way through it. My flourish, ta-da, I'm done. And just when I'm expecting everybody to laugh, the girl I'm doing the reading for, she sits back, jaw wide, eyes wide, and she says, and I'll never forget it, she says, "There's no way you possibly could have known." And I, drawing on Herculean reserves of self-control, managed not to say, "No what?" Right? Because I didn't say it. There was no point where I was like, oh, well, you've got, this is what happened in your past, this is what's happening in your future. I just said platitudes the whole time. How did I know that a dog can't walk in 4 directions? Is that what you're saying? But everybody seemed really impressed. Not only was she impressed, but everybody was going like, wow, that was really cool. One of my friends says, hey, can you do my tarot too? Can you read mine? And I'm thinking, there's no chance in hell I can pull this off twice. It's just a coincidence that nobody realized I was full of shit. I was like, takes a lot out of you, Oh, I forgot I had a mic there. That's going to sound great, man. Because of that, because 6 or 7 people saw me do this tarot reading, I got a bit of a reputation as the tarot guy, and suddenly everybody wanted me to read their tarot, which I didn't know how to do. So I set out to read some books on it. I got some books on tarot, and I read through those, and guess what? They don't tell you how to read tarot. Because reading tarot isn't a real thing, right? So, these books will tell you fun facts about the cards. They'll tell you the history of tarot. Most of it's a lie, but they'll tell you the history of tarot and some fun facts. But if you just use these books and you set out to try to read somebody's tarot, it's kind of like if you were trying to make a movie and all the knowledge you had on filmmaking came from IMDb trivia, right? You might be able to make a movie, but it's not going to impress anybody. What I should have been reading was a book like this, right? Because that's what I was doing. I was doing cold reading. I had never heard that term before. I wasn't familiar with that. I didn't know that that was what I was doing. I didn't hear the term cold reading until years later. I saw John Edwards on TV going like, I'm getting an M. And I remember thinking, oh, that's fucking brilliant. An M, how can you miss with that? But eventually, I read those other books. Eventually I couldn't keep putting people off. I had to do another tarot reading. So I did another tarot reading, and lo and behold, it went well too. Everybody seemed really impressed. I was just making shit up. Did a 3rd one, a 4th one, a 5th one, and everybody seemed to really like them. They kept telling me I was doing something that I didn't feel like I was really doing. And of course, my thought then was, hey, maybe those tarot cards really are magical, right? Maybe I'm tapping into the Akashic plane in a way that I'm not fully aware of, and it's telling me things that I just think I'm making it up, but it's actually coming from above somehow. It wasn't that, as it turns out. Eventually I figured out what I was doing. It turns out that it's very easy to fool people into thinking that you're reading tarot for a couple of reasons. This list isn't exhaustive, but I have a couple of them here. One is that everybody is their own favorite topic, right? If you tell, this isn't universally true, but if you tell somebody, hey, we're gonna spend the next 30 minutes talking about you. I'm gonna sit across from you, I'm gonna talk about your problems. This is gonna be the only thing that we talk about. Most people are like, I'm down. If I have to pretend you're magical to do it, I will. Another reason is that people will often tell you what they want you to tell them, right? They'll do that very directly. Sometimes when you read a card and it's got a reading that they don't like, they'll be like, are you sure it doesn't mean this? At which time your job as the tarot reader is to go, well, because this card came up earlier, maybe it does, whatever. So people will very often will tell you everything that they want the tarot to tell them, and then it's your job to just make the cards seem like that's what they're saying. But the most important thing, the most important contributing factor, as I'm sure you all know, is that people want you to be right. People want you to succeed when they do a tarot reading. This isn't universally true. I know most of you, if I did a tarot reading for you, you wouldn't want me to be right. You're right. You'd want to catch me doing some bullshit. But if I wouldn't read tarot for people like that, right? If I got a sense that somebody didn't want me to succeed, I'd have a terrible migraine. I'd find some reason why I wouldn't do this tarot. So with all that in mind, I'm going to do a tarot reading for you guys today. But for that, I'm going to need a querent. That is what tarot card readers call the person who's asking the tarot the question. The person that you're reading for is the querent. And I don't have one. I considered a couple of different ways of doing this talk. One would be to call a volunteer up from the audience and try to do it. That doesn't actually work, though, because so much of what I'm doing would be to key in on their reactions. And if I told you what I was keying in on, they'd react wrong, right? So that wouldn't work. I thought about staging a thing, having Lucinda come up here. But I think the best thing that we can do is a little role playing. Not like that. I mean, not like that. Call me later, but not now. Not like that now. So I'll be the tarot reader. You will be the querent, but I have to give you a couple of characteristics. Your character has to be at least fleshed out enough for me to get things wrong. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to assign you a gender like I'm the federal government. You're going to be a guy for the duration of apologies. And apologies for the stereotype. There's a reason for this, but in my experience as a tarot reader, it's much easier to read for men than women. because women typically develop very young the ability to sit across the table from a man who's completely full of shit without letting him know she knows he's completely full of shit, right? So men just tend to wear the reaction on their face a little bit more. It's a little bit easier to read. Okay, well, it's not even on their face. Very often they'll say, "You're full of shit." Well, actually, if you get anything wrong. So I'm going to make you a male. I'm also going to give you an age here. You're in your mid-20s, so be sure to stay up till 5 and eat 3 cheeseburgers for dinner tonight. Back feels great now, doesn't it? So I'm going to put you in your mid-20s for a couple of reasons. One is that this is the age that I read tarot for most. Most of the people I read, I was in my mid-20s when I did this, so most of the time I was doing it for friends and friends of friends and things like that. But also because it's a little easier to read for people in their mid-20s, generally speaking. Your life hasn't branched out quite as much as it has in your 40s, 50s, 60s. So there's only a couple of different things that people tend to consult the tarot about when they're in their mid-20s. So in these 2 ways, I'm going to make the reading a little bit easier. In every other way, I'm going to make it hard on me. I'm actually going to do what I would consider a very bad reading. I'm going to show you what happens when nothing goes right. So the other characters, I got 2 other characteristics to give you. One is that you're a friend of a friend. I never charged for my tarot readings. That was a very important thing to me ethically, right? That's how I defended myself, because at a certain point, I realized that what I was doing was just a blatant fraud, right? And I kept doing it for years and years, and I said, it's okay because I'm just giving people good advice, and I'm not charging them. Now, that does not make it ethical. I want to be clear. That does not make it ethical, and we'll get into why a little bit later in the talk, but that's how I justified it. That's how I got to sleep at night. So you're a friend of a friend, but I'm going to say that I don't know you at all. I did all of this pre-internet, so I couldn't look you up online, couldn't check your social media. There was no hot reading aspect. So let's say you're somebody I didn't know at all. You're a friend of a friend, but you just moved to town. You're moving in the same circles as I am in my mid-20s, which probably means you're a pothead. And you've heard about this guy Noah that gives tarot readings. You've heard from a couple of different people that he gives good readings, and there's one that you've heard about in particular, a mutual friend we have named Greg. And everybody says he gave Greg a reading. It was at a party. Everybody was there. It was shockingly accurate, and he didn't know anything about Greg at all going in. Pin in that phrasing. Didn't know anything about him at all. We'll come back to that in just a second. So you've heard that. You've heard that I gave Greg this shockingly accurate reading despite knowing nothing about him at all. And you know Greg. Greg is not a gullible person, right? Greg is the kind of person that you think would sniff out bullshit. So I want to give you one more characteristic. You are skeptical. Now, I don't mean you skeptical, right? I don't mean listens to the Skeptics Guide and knows the logical fallacies and knows about cold reading skeptical. I mean average guy skeptical, right? So by that I mean people who think that, maybe there is psychic power out there in the world. Maybe some people can tap into a plane that science doesn't understand to know the future. But the odds that the guy sitting across from me is doing that are very, very low. Right? So you're not skeptical necessarily that psychic powers or tarot cards are real. You're skeptical that I can wield those powers. So with those characteristics, we're going to do our tarot reading. So, and I'm not going to bust out the cards just yet because the cards don't start yet. For you, the querent, the reading starts when the cards come out. For me, the tarot reader, the tarot reading begins when the querent walks in. So step 1 is to assess. Remember that phrasing? I didn't know anything about him at all. When is the last time you sat across the table from somebody and knew nothing about them at all? You have to be all 3 monkeys, right? Obviously, you know things about somebody. You may not know much, but you can probably tell immediately what gender they present as. You can probably get a pretty good sense of their age. You can get a lot of information from a person's clothing, even if it doesn't have anything written on it. It doesn't have to say Central Florida Freethought community on it for you to learn a lot about them. Right? You might learn a little bit about what fashion, what personality they want to present with their clothing. You might learn a little something about their income, things like jewelry, piercings, tattoos. All of those things are going to tell you, give you information. The second that person starts talking, you can assess their vocabulary, their word choice. That's going to tell you a lot, usually about a person's education, about their upbringing. Their accent, obviously, will often tell you a lot. And even their name can tell you something if you ask them how to spell it. S-E-A-N versus S-H-A-W-N might tell you something about their upbringing. And that's just the obvious stuff. That's just the stuff you get from everybody, right? Very often people will tell you stuff that they don't realize. They'll be wearing the CFFC t-shirt, right? Or they'll be wearing a birthstone, which doesn't help very much if it's a diamond, but if it's a turquoise, you can probably tell that's a birthstone. They might be wearing something that has their astrological symbol on it. right? The kind of people that go for tarot readings very often are. They might have something, a necklace that has their kids' names on it, and be surprised later when you know that they have kids. You would be amazed. I once had a woman who still had, she was wearing her work shirt that had her name stitched on it. And she was surprised when I knew her. When it's that obvious, you have to tell them, you're like, it's on your shirt. And only because, the only reason I told her that is because she was going to get home, look in the mirror, and go, oh, that asshole, what's on my shirt? I wouldn't have told her I didn't think that. Okay, so that's step one. I'm going to make this visual assessment. Now, you're not going to get much information from this, but you're going to get more than none. Step two is to get you talking. Right? This is very important. Very often right here, all the work gets done. You start chatting with somebody and they'll tell you all kind of things they don't realize that they're telling you. Again, I remember a woman telling me that she was not going to come because she didn't know that she could find a babysitter, and then later was surprised when I knew she had kids. Right? So very often people will tell you stuff that they don't remember telling you or don't realize that they've told you. But in this instance, let's say because you're skeptical, you're being a little cagey. When I try to get you talking, you're like, he's trying to pump me for information. So you're very guarded. And you think because you're guarded, you didn't give me any information. But you told me that you were guarded, which gives me a ton of information. It lets me know that you're skeptical of what I'm doing here. And that's really important. I need to know that more than anything else because step three is ambiance. Now, if I start talking to you and you're immediately telling me about the great tarot readings you've had in the past and your aunt used to read tarot and you obviously buy into this stuff, then the way I'm going to create ambiance is by trying to recreate like what you remember of good tarot readings. So I'm going to light some candles very ceremoniously. I'm going to light some incense. I'm going to wave it around. I'm going to move around like a Buddhist in a kitchen, right? Very specifically. But if I get the sense that you're skeptical, I don't want to do any of that, right? Because all of that's just going to raise your hackles. It's going to make you even more skeptical of what I'm doing. It's going to seem more wooey to you. So if I'm creating ambiance at all, I want to create corporate ambiance, right? I want you to ultimately feel like you're consulting, I'm consulting on your business, right? Like I'm your accountant or something. If it's at all possible, I'm going to sit across the desk from you for this reading. I'm going to say stuff like, you know, when I do readings for my corporate clients, but I'm going to do that kind of stuff. So I'm going to try to put you out of that mindset of we're doing mystical, magical stuff and more into the mindset of, you know, you're tapping into something that business and industry have known about for a long time. And then I'm going to ask you to formulate a question for the tarot cards. And very often, this is where all the work gets done because sometimes people's question, it's like the question at the conference that's really more of a statement than a question. You know, I have a question for the tarot in 4 parts, you know. And at this point, like, it's great because they'll say, well, you know, I got this guy that I kind of like at work, and, you know, I think that he actually likes my friend, and I don't really like her all that much, and I'm willing to sacrifice that for her. And they'll tell you everything that you need to know, and then your job is just try to figure out how to pull that out of the tarot cards that come up. But if you're guarded, if you're cagey, you're probably not going to give me a specific question. You probably don't have a specific question that you want to ask. So when you struggle to formulate a question, before you say something like, I want to know what my future holds, or something specific like that, I'll interrupt you and I'll say, you know, if you don't have a question, we can just do a general reading. And more often than not, people say, yes, okay, let's just do that, right? And you think you've got me here because you've given me no information, but hey, if you don't ask a question, I can't get the answer wrong, right? So, step 4, we're going to bust out the cards. But in order to, I didn't think this through. I've got 2 hands used and I need a 3rd hand. So, okay, so in order to do this part of the talk, I have to be full of shit, right? Because I'm going to have to channel old me for the purpose of the reading, okay? So here's how we're going to do it, because I don't want you to think that I'm being honest with you when I'm doing the bullshit. So once these cards come out, from that point on, if I'm standing right here in front of the computer, I'm bullshit me, okay? That's where bullshit me lives. If I step over here, this is real me telling you what this asshole is up to, okay? So that's how we're going to do it. And hopefully this is going to work. So I'm going to bust out my cards, and I'm going to give you a few disclaimers. These are bullshit disclaimers, though. My tarot deck, my Aleister Crowley Thoth deck. And I know, I can tell by the look on your face, right, that the first thing you're thinking is, those cards aren't magic. So the first thing I'm going to say is, oh, these cards aren't magic. And the next thing you're going to say is, and that guy doesn't psych. So the next thing I'm going to say is, and I'm not psychic. Shit, that's 2 true things in a row. He's on a roll. Wait, it gets even better. And despite what a lot of people think, the tarot can't tell the future. Is this man even capable of lying? Yes, watch. What they can do is offer your subconscious a symbolic language that strips away ego, preconceived notions, and allows you to take an objective look at the present moment with such clarity that it often looks like seeing into the future. Bullshit. But hey, look at what I've done here, right? So right now, my predictions don't have to come true anymore, right? I've relieved myself of that problem. If I say something's going to happen and it doesn't happen, well, it's because I forewarned you and you avoided it, right? Or if it was a good thing, you got complacent because you knew it was coming, right? So I've removed any need for me to actually get anything right. But I'm not done making it easier on myself. Listen to this bit. And it's important to understand that I'm not going to read your tarot. We are going to read your tarot together. Because the language of the tarot is the subconscious, and I don't have access to your subconscious mind. So I can tell you what these cards normally mean and how these symbols are normally interpreted, but your subconscious might feel a different way about it. So if there's a symbol in the card that really jumps out at you, or if I say something that doesn't sound right to you, feel free to speak up and let me know, and we can reinterpret this based on your symbolic language. Right? Right? Think of all I've done here, right? Now I can't fuck this up at all. You can. But I can. I gave a bunch of readings. Those were good. Did you hear about Greg? I was shockingly accurate with him. I've given a bunch of good readings. The variable here is you. You've never gotten a good reading, so if I screw up, it's probably because you didn't point out enough symbols to me or ask a good enough question. But that's not all, right? Because I've also given you permission to steer the car here. I've told you now, if you don't like my reading, feel free to reinterpret it. Put your own reading in. And another thing that I've done, and this is actually very important and gets overlooked in a lot, is that I've created a reason for delay. So I almost left this out of the reading because it takes too long to explain. But for most people, this isn't universally true, but for most people, if they're sitting across the table from you, taking all of your attention, there's a clock ticking in their head immediately about how long they can do that before they're being rude. For most people, that clock runs out at about 30 to 45 minutes, right? At about 30 to 45 minutes, they're like, I have taken up too much of this person. And if I can get you to that point quicker, then you're less likely to point out things that I say that don't make sense or contradictions or things like that, right? So I want to get that 30-minute clock expired as fast as possible. So, okay, so now we're going to do a bit of bullshit that I'm actually pretty proud of. So, all right, this is the shuffle. And it's going to be kind of hard to do while I'm holding the mic, but here's what I'll say. I don't actually have to do the bit. You'll get it. So, got to go back here where bullshit me lives. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the cards very quickly, one after the other, and I want you to ignore the titles. Each card will have a title at the bottom. Ignore that and just pay attention to the images. And try not to let those images linger too long. And so I'll do this. I'll go like this. Real quickly, I'll go through the entire deck that way. And as I'm doing it, I'll explain. Oh, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting this is bullshit. So I'll do that whole time, and then I'll explain as I do it. I'll go. Now what we're doing is we're creating a subconscious map of the tarot deck here. Your conscious mind will only remember a few images, but your subconscious mind will know the entire order of the deck when we get finished. And once I'm done showing you all these cards, I'm going to turn them over and I'll hand over to you to shuffle. Now, I don't want you to shuffle like we're playing poker here. You're not trying to randomize the cards. What you're trying to do is allow your subconscious mind to put the most important cards at the top of the deck. Come on, that's pretty good bullshit, right? Right? Because what I've done now, because you were skeptical, right? I wouldn't do any of this shit if you weren't skeptical. But now I have moved this out of the realm of magic and into the realm of pseudopsychology, right? Which is a lot easier to sell to people. That's not how the fucking subconscious mind works. But for the average skeptical guy, right, that sounds at least plausible. For we only use 10% of our minds guy, that sounds plausible. For mid-20s pothead who's going to see a tarot reader, that's probably plausible, right? And it gets past the biggest objection people have to tarot, which is how the hell could you possibly how could the cards know what was going on, right? But now you've chosen the order. Your subconscious mind put them there. right? So I put a connection between you and the randomness of the tarot deck. So, and then I'm going to do this. I'm going to say, okay, so let me make sure I've got these in a certain order. Okay. So what I'm going to do, you hand me back the deck. I delay a little longer if you don't spend enough time shuffling. You hand me back the deck and I say, okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to peel the top 9 cards, 7, 8, 9, off the deck. And these are the 9 cards that we're going to use for our read. So I'm going to set those aside. And then I'm going to go through the deck, and we're going to choose what's called a querent card. Now, normally, when you do a querent, or when you choose a querent card, most tarot readers will tell you you choose that based on age and gender, hair color. I don't follow that tradition. I follow what's known as the Macedonian school. There's no such thing. Like if I was doing this today, I'd probably have to come up with different bullshit because people could look it up on Google it and go, no fucking ass. What the hell is he talking about? But what I'm doing here is I'm setting up, hey, if you've ever had a tarot reading and they did it different than me, that's because they didn't do the fucking Macedonian school like the good tarot readers do, right? So I've given myself an excuse not to do anything that you're expecting me to do. And in the Macedonian school, the querent card is chosen by going through the deck. I'll select 4 or 5 cards, and then I'll hand them to you. And you will choose between those cards which one you want to represent. And so then I'll look through the deck. I'll do it like this. I'll go like this. And I'll go all the way through the deck doing that, as though I'm choosing them by some criterion. I'm not, right? It's just completely random. And after I've gone through the entire deck, I'll hand you 5 cards, right? Let's say that these are the 5 cards I hand, right? And you're looking at those cards, right? Trying to decide between them which one best represents you. Now, by a show of hands, when you were looking at those cards, trying to decide which one represented you, did anybody notice that I looked at this bottom card? Sleight of hand bullshit, right? While you were looking at that, as soon as you started looking at that, I glanced at the bottom card, so I now know what the final outcome card is. This is going to be an advantage to me. But that's not all I did. If you noticed, I also looked through the entire deck after I took your 9 cards out. Right? I know what's in these cards right now. And I don't know exactly, there are magicians that are good enough to know exactly what's in the deck. There's mnemonics that you can memorize. I never really got that good at it, but I know 3 or 4 cards that are in here, right? But like, so I know, for example, that the Tower card and the Hermit card are in here because I was looking for those in the deck. I didn't find them. So I know those are in here somewhere. So now I can start setting things up. And when those cards come up, I can go, oh, see, this is what I was talking about before, right? I'll show you how that works. So let's say you choose this card, you choose the card of valor, doesn't matter. And I'll say, all right, so this is the first card. This is the, oh, bullshit. So this is the card of valor. Now, we don't actually interpret this card because it wasn't chosen by your subconscious. It was chosen consciously, but it may become important later on. We might want to relate things back to it if we see a lot of fire or other cards that are controlled, but that are ruled by Mars or Leo. The only reason I'm saying that, by the way, is that I want to point out to people that I know what these 2 symbols mean. Right? This is I spent a lot of books learning fun facts. I might as well get some use out of them. But we don't interpret this card. We just use it as a reference point for later cards. So now I'm 10% of the way through the reading. I haven't had to do shit, right? So now we move on to step 5, the actual reading. Now for this part of the reading, so I considered a couple of different ways of doing the talk here too. I thought about just picking 10 cards at random and just showing you how it really doesn't matter what cards show up. I can make any card mean anything if I want it to. But I couldn't do the slides and everything if I did that. So I just chose 10 cards at random and kind of gave, or 9 cards at random, and I gave you sort of, I'm going to give you sort of what I would have done had those cards come up. So the first card is the crossing card, and this card is the card of change. Now I think this is fairly clear, right? It's fairly obvious what the interpretation here is, because the crossing card is the thing that you're conflicting against, and the card of change here represents a cyclical form of change. You see the yin-yang, you see the Ouroboros, you see the way that we're talking about an ever-shifting sand beneath your feet kind of change, and you're trying to find the permanence within it. Okay, so what I'm doing here is, if you're in your mid-20s, you're coming to see a tarot card reader, you're coming for one of 2 reasons, almost certain. 1, you have a problem with a relationship. 2, and far more likely, You are feeling that mid-20s listlessness of where am I going in my life? What am I doing? Your worldview that you had as a kid has sort of fallen apart. It's shown itself not to be sufficient. And I'm pretty sure, because 3 times out of 4, if somebody comes to me a guy in their mid-20s comes to me for a reading, that's what it's going to be about. So I'm trying to push that. But if you notice the way I phrased that, it could be accurate whether it was that feeling of ennui or it was a relationship, right? Both of those, the shifting sands thing, will work for. I'm going to do that again with the next card. And this next card is the card of past influences. This is the Tower card. Oh, sorry, I forgot some bullshit. I want to go back for you for just a second. This is important bullshit. There's 2 things that I want to point out about this card that are very important that we might want to look for later, because very often the conflict card will set up the symbolic language that we'll use for the entire reading. So the 2 things I want you to pay particular attention to is, if you can see inside the yin-yang here, there are 4 symbols. These are the symbols for the various elements, for the 4 elements. So, and I also want to pay attention specifically to this snake symbol, because so often the snake represents a conflict. So we're going to be on the lookout for those 2 symbols later in the reading, the elemental symbols and the symbol of the snake. Those might have special significance in your reading. Now, there's 2 reasons I did this. One is because I already cheated, and I happen to know that the card of worry, the final card, has the 4 elemental symbols on it, right? So now it's going to seem kind of magical when that happens, when that comes up. The snake symbol is there. It shows up throughout the tarot. Odds are pretty good that I'm going to get another snake symbol in there somewhere. But in this instance, I actually know I'm going to, because I know the card, the Hermit, is going to be in the reading somewhere, and it has a snake symbol that's going to be very useful to me, right? So I've set up a little bit of bullshit that's going to seem kind of magical later. So past influences card. This card is the Tower. And this really fits right into the narrative that we already had going with change. This is a card about something that seemed permanent being destroyed, coming apart. Now again, notice this could be a relationship, or this could be that sort of 20s ennui, right? I'm probing that concept, and I'm watching my querent to see how they're reacting, right? When I say, something that seemed permanent has come crashing down, in my estimation, are they filling in the blanks here with something? Or are they looking at me like, well, this is impressive, right? Now let's say, because everything's going to go bad for me in this reading, let's say that I'm getting the sense that they're not impressed with my platitudinous bullshit yet, right? I have to take a swing. I have to try to get something right that I could get wrong. That doesn't mean I have to open myself up for the possibility of being wrong, though, because I'm going to use the magical word normally. I'll show you how it works. Now, this is the card of future influences. And we have the Hierophant, another major arcana card. Now, the Hierophant normally is interpreted as a teacher, like a father figure, a boss, somebody whose approval you seek and do not have. And now I'm going to do another assessment, right? The odds that a pothead in their mid-20s has daddy issues are pretty high, right? But let's say I look and I don't see that recognition. I don't see him thinking to himself, yeah, I was wondering when Dad was going to show up in this reading, right? He's just looking kind of blank and like he's unimpressed. Well, I said normally, right? Because so normally can end with an and or a but. If it had seemed like I was onto something, I would have said normally this represents a teacher, a paternal figure. And because it came up in the future influences card, I would say that this is somebody whose approval you do not yet have, right? I would have said something like that. But because you didn't show me any recognition, I'm going to add a but, right? Normally it would be interpreted as a teacher or a patriarchal figure. But because it's in the future influences card, I think it's far more likely, or future influences position, I think it's far more likely that you are the hero. That we're talking about somebody seeking your approval, or that will seek your approval in the future. Okay, so I swung, I missed, and now you don't know that I missed. Or maybe you have a sense that I missed, but you don't know for sure. This is unverified. You can't tell me that there's not going to be somebody in the future that looks for your approval, right? So one swing, one miss. I don't want to take another swing right away. So I get this card. So this is the crowning card, and this is the card of wealth, the 10 of discs. Now, I don't immediately have an idea of my bullshit here. I could give you some nonsense about this. I could just tell you some fun facts about it until I thought of some bullshit, but that's too hard. I'm going to do it the easy way. And the crowning card is really actually, it's not very important by itself. It's usually read in conjunction with this second card. Yeah, I got out of reading another card. This is the root card, and this is the star. Now you'll notice that 3 of the 5 cards we've chosen that were randomly chosen, or that were chosen by your subconscious so far, have been major arcana cards. It's very unusual because only 22 of the 78 cards in the tarot deck are major arcana. Now at this point, 5 cards in, something is going to have happened more often than normal, right? Oh, you're getting a lot of 1s. Ooh, you're getting a lot of major arcana, a lot of court cards, a bunch of 6s have come up. Something like that will have happened. I'm going to probe you a little bit to see how bad you are at statistics, to see if you're impressed by that, right? And if you are, I can do a lot of nonsense with math later on. I can start doing, what are the odds another major arcana? And you're going to feel like your reading is really going well or something. But again, everything's going bad for me, so you look at me like, of course, something. So the star is a card of renewal. You can see the image here is of someone pouring 1 cup over themselves and another cup out. So they're giving to themselves and to the world at the same time. And when you combine this with the card of wealth that we saw earlier, what you're probably looking at here is something that you have in abundance, not money necessarily. Wealth very rarely means money in this instance, but something that you have in abundance or perceive that you have in abundance, which you are giving away too much of and not giving enough to yourself. I'll give you an example. You may be perceived as a very patient person. People may think that you have infinite stores, you have a wealth of patience. But if you give out too much patience to others without giving enough patience to yourself, you will run out. Right? So the platitudes, right? This is probably true of you. It's just platitudinous shit. I've given myself a minute since my last miss, right? And I've just, I've gotten myself through 2 more cards. I've said something that's almost certainly true, right? That there's, because I didn't even say that you had, you weren't giving yourself, being patient enough with yourself. I said there was something like that. Obviously, something like that. This is one of those statements that cannot be wrong. But again, you don't look impressed, so now I have to take an actual swing. Again, that doesn't mean I have to make it possible for me to be wrong. So it goes something like this. So this next card is the card of internal influence. And it's the Princess of Wands. Well, that's it. It only happens 1 in 78 times. Let me ask you a question. Do you have a younger sibling that you're close to? Okay, so now I've actually taken a swing here. If you say yes, then I can go, oh, okay, so that's probably what the Hierophant was about, your younger sibling, or whatever. I can start reinterpreting shit as though I knew about this younger sibling the whole time. I was suspecting that they were there, and now they're going to be the center of the reading. And I'm doubly lucky if it's a younger sister, right? Because that's a female on the card, right? It's a princess, not a prince. And the word sibling sounds like sister, so you will remember it almost certainly as me asking, did you have a younger sister, not a younger sibling, right? That's just how human psychology works. So if you had a younger sister, that's going to be a pretty big hit, right? Now, I happen to know about 1 out of every 3 people has a younger sibling. It's not a huge swing, right? But it's not a guarantee. So if you have a younger sibling, that might actually, you might go, yes, I do, yeah. And if you have a younger sibling in your mid-20s, there's a very good chance that you've grown apart or there's some conflict about your younger sibling, right? But again, everything's going to go wrong for me. So you say, no, I'm an only child. Well, now, it doesn't have to necessarily be a biological brother or sister. It could be a friend, a younger friend, or even an older friend that like is kind of naive that you look over or something like that. So now I've backed away, right? My prediction is backed away. And again, I haven't actually made a prediction because I just asked you a question, right? So I backed away and I've given it, this is like, a 3 out of 4 type chance, right? That you have some friend that's younger than you that you kind of think of as that you have to look over. But let's say, again, everything's going wrong for me. So let's say you honestly think about it and you're like, I can't think of who that would be. I'm going to back away even further. Well, it's not necessarily somebody who's still in your life. It could be somebody that you worked with or knew in school that you maybe had an altercation with, or that your relationship didn't end particularly well. All right, now that's guaranteed to be somebody in your life that I'm describing at this point, right? Plus, you just said no to me twice. It would be rude to say no a 3rd time. And that's people's minds really feel like that, right? Like, I don't want to be an asshole to the guy, I guess, and so you're almost certainly you'll think of somebody I could be describing, right? So you'll say something like, oh, I guess my buddy, that guy I trained at work got really mad at me and I don't really know why, and maybe that's been on my mind. Maybe that's what I was thinking when my subconscious put that card there. right? So now I've rescued my guess at the very least. I do know that this isn't somebody that really belongs in your tarot reading, so I'm not going to pursue that much. I'm going to, as much as possible, I'm going to drop that thread, or I'm going to try to reinterpret it later. But at least I got some kind of hit out of it, and now I'm going to move on. And now it's time to give you a little kick in the ass. I'll tell you why. Because people, when you do tarot readings, if you come back later and they tell their friends, I got a tarot reading from the guy, it was a very good reading. They'll say, those people just tell you what you want to hear. I want to give you a counterexample. I want to give you the ability to say, well, actually, at one point he was kind of a dick. And it's usually in this card. This is the 8th card of the reading. That's usually when I want to do that. So this is the card of external influence. It's best to think of this as the card of what other people see when they look at you. And what they see is the Prince of Discs. Now, it's crazy that 2 court cards would come up back to back like that. So the Prince of Discs is an interesting card because there are 4 princes in the deck. All of them are shown on chariots, but the other 3 are shown riding into battle. This one is shown like looking over his harvest, trying to decide if it's time to harvest his crop. I didn't read all those books and get nothing out of them, right? And I think when people look at you, that's very often what they see. Now, what might seem to you like weighing all of the options can seem to other people like dithering or failing to make a decision. And I think that sometimes your inability to put the chips down leaves other people thinking that you're lazy or that you don't care. Now, again, almost certainly true. Right? Like that's probably true of about 70% of you at some points in your life, even if you're impulsive, right? Sometimes that's true of you. This is horoscope shit, right? But I did say something about you that wasn't complimentary, so you don't feel like I was just blowing smoke up your ass the entire time. Now, at this point in the reading, I have 2 cards remaining. Unlike most tarot readers, I don't lay all the cards out in the Celtic cross spread beforehand. I lay them down one at a time so that I can cheat as often as I want, and look at what's coming. So at this point in the reading, I find myself in a really interesting position. I have 2 cards left, and I know what they are. The bottom card I already looked at. It was the card of worry. The other card is the Hermit, because I noticed that one was missing when I looked through the deck earlier. I know what's still coming up. I want to take advantage of that. I don't like the worry card as the final outcome, right? Your final outcome is worry. That's no fun. I could just try to deal off the bottom of the deck. Most people wouldn't notice that, but I don't even have to work that hard, because I went to the Macedonian school. So I'm just going to say, now a lot of tarot readers will tell you that the last card is the final outcome card. I don't subscribe to that. To me, the penultimate card is the final outcome. Because I can say whatever the fuck I want. And for your final outcome, we get the Hermit. And so now that might seem like a negative card to show up as your final outcome, because your first thought might be, oh my God, I end up alone. But that's not what the Hermit is. The Hermit isn't somebody who was pushed out of society because people didn't want him. That's the exile. The Hermit is somebody who chose to remove themselves from society. Now, again, we're talking symbolically here, so this doesn't mean that you're going to go off in the woods like Zarathustra and live in a cave. What it means, most likely, given what we've seen up to this point, is that you're going to find a way to be an intellectual hermit and no longer seek the external validation of others about your thoughts and your world, which, if you think about it, is what you're after. Now, I want you to draw. I want to draw particular attention to this symbol right here. You see the snake is shown back up, but instead, earlier we saw him as this agent of change and chaos, but now you see him protecting this egg. You see him as an agent of rebirth, protecting your rebirth. So that very change that was in conflict at the beginning of the reading has now been mastered. Well, I just got goosebumps, right? But I've given you a pretty positive final outcome here. You feel pretty good about yourself. Most likely, you're probably thinking, well, this tarot reading wasn't all that damn impressive, but I feel good about myself. And now I've got one more card to deal with. I really don't want to deal with it, so I'm going to get it out of the way as quickly as I can. Now, this final card is the warning. This is what happens if you go too far down the road that you're on. And this is, very appropriately, the card of worry. Now, I got to be honest, this card comes up a lot in this position. One time in 78. And what it represents, so you can see here, we talked about this before, these 4 symbols here, these are the elemental symbols. We saw those on the card of change. Again, I cheated because I knew those were here. And you can see that you have the 4 elements, and then the 5th element, this represents spirit or akasha. Now, the reason that the pentagram inverted is seen as a satanic symbol is because it puts spirit at the bottom, below the elements, instead of at the top where it belongs. The elements should be subordinate to that. Of course, worry is putting the wrong thing first. And if you validate your own intellect, you pretty much invite yourself to be thinking of, to be focused on the wrong things, which are going to perpetually cause you to worry. That doesn't mean anything, right? I'm just trying to get rid of that damn card, right? So now you think I'm done. I'm not quite done. There's one more step. I've done all 10 cards. Now I'm going to do the spin. I'm going to spend the next 5 to 10 minutes trying to convince you that what you just saw was impressive, right? All the cards are laid out there. I'm going to try to create a cohesive narrative that pulls in all the disparate elements. At this point in the reading, for most people, not you because you've been a pain in my ass the whole time, but for most people by this time, they'll have told me a couple of things that I can now like retrofit. Oh, that must have been what the card of wealth was referring to. Oh, that must have been what the star was referring to. And so I can tie all of this together. Now, again, because we're talking about a reading where the person never actually said, well, what does this symbol mean? Or told me, well, I don't think that that sounds like me at all. They never gave me any feedback. I don't have a whole hell of a lot to work with, right? So I'll go in there and I'll try to put together a little narrative and I'll send them on their way. Now, honestly, let's be honest. If you got that reading and somebody came to you later and they said, oh, you know what, let me put my cards away so that you don't have to worry about whether I'm bullshit me anymore. Retired bullshit me again. All right, so if you got that reading and somebody asked you later, they said, hey, how was that reading that Noah gave you? Well, if I was a nice guy the whole time and I made you feel good about yourself by the end of it, you'll probably say something like, well, it wasn't what I was expecting, but it was a lot of fun. It was really insightful. I learned a lot. I enjoyed myself. Right? But consider how little has to change for that reading to be shockingly accurate. 20-year-old guy, 20-something-year-old guy has issues with his father or his boss. That's a 3 out of 4 chance. Somebody has a younger sibling, 1 out of 3. Right? There was another bit I forgot to throw in there where I asked if I was supposed to have asked if the person was an artist, and of course they said no because everything was going wrong for me. But again, 20-something pothead talking to a tarot reader probably considers themselves an artist, right? In some way. And so if you do exactly that reading for 10 different people, at least one of those 10 people, you're going to nail it. Everything you're going to say is going to be right. When I say daddy issues, they're going to go like, wow, yeah, no, I do have father issues. And when I say younger sibling, they're going to go, how the hell did he know about my little sister? And when I say artist, they're going to say, wow, this guy's incredible. And I'm going to have another Greg. I'm going to have another reading that people say, wow, it was shockingly accurate. Now, if I can get 1 out of 10 people to say I was shockingly accurate, and consider if I got 1 or 2 of those predictions right, I would try to erase the third one when I was doing my spin. So I've got to probably, 1 out of 10 thinks it was incredibly accurate. Maybe another 2 out of the 10 think it was very accurate. Another 2 say, well, he did know something that he couldn't have known. And the remaining 5 are like, well, yeah, it was really interesting. I had a lot of fun. Nowhere in there is there somebody saying, well, he was wrong about everything. Because I never exposed myself to the possibility of being wrong. I did thousands of tarot readings, conservatively 2,000 tarot readings. So I had 200 Gregs, right? So I said 2,000 tarot readings. I did those for probably about 800 people, right? There were some people that came back again and again for tarot readings. But I read for a lot of people. And eventually I realized over a long period of time that I actually had a terrible idea. So I want to close off. I started off by telling you guys about my first tarot reading. I want to close by telling you about the last one I ever did, other than this one. So I had a friend. So most of my friends that got tarot readings regularly, I got the sense that they kind of knew, and it was for entertainment purposes only, kind of a thing. We were all just having fun here, and it was a way for me to give them advice. Right? All I was doing was unlicensed therapy that I was in no way qualified to do. What could go wrong? But some people didn't think that. Some people very clearly bought into it and thought that the tarot were telling them divine messages. And the buddy I'm talking about was one of those types. He would come to me for a tarot reading about once a month for something or another. And he came to see me after he'd had a reading one day, and he told me, he said, hey, I'm really glad we did that reading. Without it, I don't think I ever would have had the courage to quit my job. Yeah. We're talking about a guy with kids, right? He had 2 kids. And he had a decent job. It wasn't a great job, but he had a decent job. He was like an assistant manager at some fast food restaurant, which is about the best thing he was going to do with his qualifications at that point in his life. But he and his buddy had just gone and seen Fast and the Furious 2 or something like that. And they decided that they wanted to start, yeah, you've probably met this guy, or somebody indistinguishable from, he decided he wanted to start a job retrofitting cars to look like the cars from Fast and the Furious, which is insane because anybody who wants that done to their car can do it themselves. It was a terrible idea. And at no point in the tarot reading did I tell him to do that, right? But I yes-anded him because that's what tarot does. It tells you what you want to hear. So over and over again, I gave him validation of something that I didn't know what I was validating, right? So I gave him permission to say that this idiot idea that him and his buddy had was divinely sanctioned by the tarot. And I realized I couldn't keep giving this guy tarot readings in good conscience. But this is one of those things where when you pull your finger out of the dike, the whole dam bursts. Because as soon as I started thinking about what he'd done, I started thinking about all these people that I'd done a tarot reading for once, ever, and never saw again. What did I tell them to do? What did I give them permission? Right? How many lives might I have ruined by making people think that their idiot ideas were divinely sanctioned? But not just that. It wasn't just that. How many people did I prime for another charlatan who came through and said, I do tarot readings, now give me money? But because they knew tarot card readings were real, because they got a great one from me, right? They were easier to take advantage. And what about all the people out there that maybe had the realizations that we all had, when we came out of religion, had those realizations that, hey, maybe science has it right. I was the counterexample for so many people where they were like, but I've seen magic work. And once I realized all the damage I had done, I hung up my tarot, I put them in this box, and I decided they would never come out again unless it was to do something like this. I would pay penance with them, and that was it. And I want to thank you guys for allowing me to pay penance. Thanks. Thanks so much.
That was incredible, very entertaining, and enlightening. My question is, it seems to me that a big part of this is that people see the tarot as like some authority because it's ancient and historic and mysterious. And I was kind of thinking of the Bible at the same time. I was wondering how much of this manipulating of people is related to ancient, supposed ancient documents that have power itself, or Torah, or whatever.
Yeah, the ancientness of the tarot is exaggerated quite a bit. There are there is like a form of card divination that goes back thousands of years. The modern tarot, I think, only really dates back to the mid-1800s. But if you ask, if you consult virtually any source on that, they'll try to tie it to something that's thousands of years old. I've seen people do, though, the same basic tricks using the Bible, right? They'll just choose random Bible passages and do those like a tarot reading, and it's all the same tricks.
Is there a time where you had such a big hit by accident that you surprised even yourself? Like, oh crap, how did I get that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it was when I was, I talked about the normally thing. It's when I discovered that. Because I said, I was doing a reading with somebody and I said something about, this normally would represent a young man that you're not related to, but that drives you nuts. Right? And it turned out that his roommate had a son and he was on the verge of moving out of his house because of that. But I was about to give him the but. I don't think that's what it means in this interpretation. But as soon as I said that, he was like, oh, crap, well, I know who that is, So, yeah. In fact, I would say for about a year, I actually thought that I was doing magic. I genuinely bought into this for about a year. And then I started to realize, it becomes, I think it's important to say not everybody who does tarot readings knows that they're full of shit. But anybody who's any good at it does, right? So as I got better at it, I realized I was getting better by lying more.
Hi, I'm just wondering, in my experience, it's usually the women who go to this, and that's why I was surprised that you said it was a man. Have you found that men go because they're pushed by women to do this?
I don't know. I think it's probably a lot different if you just set up a shop and you put out a sign that says, I will tarot for money. And because my clientele was basically being selected from, my friend group, it was probably a little more male heavy. I probably gave more readings to women than men, but giving them to men was always easier.
Hi, nice talk. But I was a lot of you talk about reading Coley and just seeing what their the correlation between that and what artificial intelligence does and social media does by pulling all our information and throwing stuff at us as well. I just found it very interesting. So, but if you had any thoughts on it.
Yeah, so I think you've moved in a lot of ways from cold reading to hot reading there, right? Because it does have the information to go on and everything. But I have found that the sort of yes-anding that is at the heart of divination, that is at the heart of tarot, is also at the heart of ChatGPT. I don't know if you guys, anybody here listen to the Citation Needed podcast that we do? We did a story recently about a guy who got convinced by ChatGPT that he was a superhero. It was in the New York Times. You might have seen it. The ChatGPT convinced him that he had created the greatest mathematical breakthrough of the last 300 years and that he could use it to create an anti-gravity suit and fly around and stop crime. And it would constantly say to him, now, would you like to upgrade to the premium model of ChatGPT to learn more? Because it's a yes-and machine, right? It's a machine designed to make you want to have more conversations, which is exactly what tarot is. So that's a very interesting observation, yeah.
Two questions for you. One, probably in the early part of your career, did you have a tarot reading? And second, when you're going and visiting these pagan festivals or whatever, did you ever have chats with other tarot readers and tarot readers to say, hey, this is BS or whatever?
No. So no on both counts. I never got a tarot reading from anybody else. And there was a couple of people that I taught tarot reading to that they would give me readings based on sort of like my own techniques. And man, I'll tell you what, I could do a whole other talk on how I pretended I was doing it. But I have had some tarot readings since then, since I hung up my cards to see what other people are doing. And honestly, I most of the time I go in and I'm like, well, you're not even trying. I have never met another person who is currently reading tarot that would admit they know that it's bullshit. I've met a lot of people who used to do it. Even people who used to work for like psychic phone lines and stuff like that, they used to do it. And they'll all admit that they universally basically will admit that they knew it was bullshit when they were doing it.
Is it that lucrative of a business?
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of people seem to think that if you've got a lot of money, you have sense in some sort, or in some, we're not a meritocracy. There's a bunch of rich idiots out there. And look, when I talked about my corporate clients, that was just a bullshit line, but I had a very good sense that if I wanted to do that, I could have done that, right? I know of a lot, like you look at the money Uri Geller makes selling his psychic abilities to like fucking oil companies and whatnot. It's pretty substantial, right? Everybody wants that advantage, and if you can convince them even a little that there might be an advantage, people who have enough money, they can throw a little money at that. Like, all right, it's only $1,000. Maybe though, if the magic is real, it's worth it, but I can afford to lose that. There was a story of a psychic that we covered on Scathing Atheist not too long ago in New York who kept convincing her clients that their money was haunted and that they needed to give it to her to get it away get all that cursed money away from them. So,
Thanks so much for being here.
thank you.
Oh, freedom from religion in this nation.